All right, y'all, let's get started. So welcome to the role of the executive director in fundraising. Just saying that feels loaded, so I want everybody to take a big breath, whether you are on the development side or the ED side. I was describing this to my mom last night as like one of those classic like man versus nature sort of issues and trying to figure out how these two roles fit together. Um, so truly appreciate the partnership of Resilience Initiative, who makes um, us having this space possible, which is amazing. They have been long-term partners since the very beginning of the pandemic for us. Um, so please let us know in the chat name, organization, role, um, anything that you are dying to learn in our next 90 minutes together or in our 90 minutes that we will have together next week. As you see, this session is being recorded, and I'm going to say okay. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat along the way. We will have a good chunk for QA at the end, but helps to see what's percolating along the way. And also just one final note, there's going to be a short survey at the end of the presentation. So please, please, please fill out the survey because it helps us craft topics and change our teaching styles and things like that to accommodate the students that we have. So with that, I would like to introduce my organization first, so you know where Janet and I are coming from. So Progressive Multiplier is a funding intermediary, and our vision is a progressive movement with the scale and power to achieve justice and realize democracy and restore the environment. We believe that money multiplied is change amplified. So we help progressive movements do exactly that, reach sustainability and scalability through working with them on revenue generation projects and shoring up their catalytic capacities for revenue generation and diversifying how they bring in revenue. So in our partnership with Resilience Initiative, we offer, in addition to sort of special events like this one, where we've got a two-parter, we do a monthly fundraising Friday. So in the email that you get from Janet, you will see a registration for the monthly fundraising Friday. We are always open to, if you have topics that you are dying to dig into, please, please, please let us know what they are. Um, the other thing that we offer, and I want to raise this up very specifically here, is one-on-one fundraising coaching. You can have up to 5 hours of work with us, and we certainly have had groups that have done multiple blocks of 5, depending on how they're using their capacity hours with the Resilience Initiative. We can do just about any fundraising consulting-y kind of project that you are interested in. So we have trained boards, we have helped with annual development plans, we have helped with integrating fundraising and comms departments, we've done major gift training. So in the questions that we collected before when you guys were registering for this session, all of those questions that were asked would be absolutely perfect fundraising coaching topics. So like I'm an ED and I don't have any fundraising staff. What should my plan be? Or I'm an ED who has fundraising staff and a fundraising committee on my board, and we need to figure out how to work with them. So any of those things are fair game for fundraising coaching. So please reach out to Michelle at the Resilience Initiative if you are interested in signing up, or if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Janet or myself. So now that we have talked about Resilience Initiative and their amazing partnership and Progressive Multiplier and its amazingness, I want to introduce myself and my partner in crime here on the phone. Janet Davison, say hi, Janet, who is labeled workshop facilitator, which I swear is not her name, is our chief of staff here at Progressive Multiplier. And she was kind enough when I was working on my slides this morning and realized I wanted to do a bunch of polls and things like that to hang out with us for 90 minutes and be my tech partner in crime. So Janet, thank you for answering the call and being with us today. My name is Bethany Mackey, and I am a nonprofit fundraiser turned executive director based in St. Petersburg, Florida. I started my fundraising career at the Pittsburgh AIDS Task Force in 2002. PATF is now the Allies for Health and Wellbeing, and I am incredibly proud to be part of their now, as of this year, 40-year history, and to have some of the dollars that I raised be part of that legacy. Um, PATF is where I learned the cathartic, healing, life affirming power of both giving to and raising money for a mission. 11 years after my time at the Pittsburgh AIDS Task Force ended, I moved south to Florida. Definitely like the no snow. And I incidentally married a man with AIDS. So part of our journey together has been giving to Equality Florida, which is the leading organization in our state for combating HIV criminalization laws. Um, so imagine my absolute full circle surprise after starting my job at Progressive Multiplier as the inaugural program director when our founding ED, Phil Radford, told me that Equality Florida was actually one of the grantees I'd be working with. So got to know them not only as a donor, but also as a program officer. And that's really working with groups like Equality Florida and now over 200 groups similar really prepared me to succeed Phil as the ED. It'll be 3 years ago in November. So, being the ED of an organization that gets to help groups like all of yours get better at that cathartic, healing, life affirming thing we call fundraising is literally my dream job. So, I was thrilled when Resilience Initiative asked me to do this training. So, that is why I am here today. So, really, I'm looking forward to diving into this topic. So we're going to start with some breakout groups, and looks like we've got about 20 folks.
Hey, Lori, how are you?
Hey, Dan. Um, so the purpose of our breakout groups here up front is going to be to make ED connections with your peers and surface any questions that we need to cover either this week or next week. So you are going to very shortly see a pop-up on the screen that asks you to join one of 4 groups. If you are an ED with no staff, no fundraising staff, an ED with just one staff person dedicated to fundraising, an ED with multiple fundraising staff, or if you are actually a dev or an ops person. We had a handful of folks in those disciplines who also registered for this training. So choose your session. Please introduce yourselves with name and pronouns, organization, role if you're not an ED, and lift up what challenges you're facing. I would ask if somebody in your group could scribe, and when you get back in the main room, throw all the challenges in the chat so that we can make sure that we're covering all of those. So, Janet, are we ready? And we will have, I think, what do we say, 7 minutes? All right, let's do it.
B, it looks like we have 2 groups with just 1 people. Oh, dev, ops, and staff. I don't know if you wanted to pop in there.
If we could Where do you need me to be?
DevOps and staff, please.
Okay. Can you throw me in there? Because I can't see.
Oh, you can't see.
I can't, I
How
don't
do
get the
I
pop-up.
do that?
All right, now I can join breakout room. Okay. That is going to stop the screen sharing. Still want me to do it? And we're back. All right. Thanks, Janet, for getting us to our breakout rooms and back. All right, everyone. So would love to see thrown in the chat for anybody who was doing some scribing, what challenges you heard. And I would ask, and that's totally fine. If you missed a couple of folks, they can certainly pop into the chat with what their challenges are. I can raise it up for my group since there were only two of us. When you have an ED who is not allocated enough sufficiently to fundraising for whatever reason, how do you make sure that you're using the limited time you have with them at the highest use for furthering the diversification of revenue? And how do you start building relationships beyond the ED with the program officers and things like that? So I know that over allocated EDs never happens in our sector. So um, what you see on the screen in front of you these are all the questions that were put in the registration. So these are the kinds of things that are on folks' mind, and I've noted where we're going to cover them in parts 1 this week or in part 2 next week. So can we hear from someone who was in the group of EDs with no development staff, and to raise up some of the common challenges that they heard? Can somebody please be brave?
We actually didn't really get to that because there were so many of us. We were just doing introductions. So.
Okay, so in this group, we've got a lot of no staff EDs, is what I'm hearing.
So I guess we don't have enough time to even look at what our challenges are.
Well, Kim, what brought you to the call today as an ED with no fundraising staff?
Yes.
Why are you here? What you looking to get?
I guess just skills. I don't have any formal training or background in fundraising, and so I'm kind of doing it on the fly.
Okay. I know you are not alone.
Yeah.
Okay. So hard skills training for
resources.
EDs.
Yeah, I'm kind of making it up as I go.
Okay. We can definitely handle that. What about our EDs that have a development staff, singular? Do we have anybody?
There were 3 of us.
Awesome. Katie, let's hear it.
Yeah, we shared, and 2 of us are in abortion and 1 of us is in climate change. And so we talked about just the targeting of our sectors in the current moment. We talked about even the folks who used to support specifically in the context of abortion, maybe not being as willing to support out loud. And also in the I'm global, and in the global movement, a lot of funders who are no longer onboarding new partners because they really need to care for their existing grantees who've lost a lot of funding and security. And
Nope, makes total sense. We support most of our portfolio are groups like yours, so we are deeply steeped in that targeting right now, unfortunately.
And we were about to hear about the challenges in the climate change field as we closed up, but I imagine that the current administration's targeting there is also a problem.
I appreciate you sharing. And Andrew, appreciate you and putting in the chat there as well. So what about our EDs with multiple dev staffs?
We did not have any.
All right. So
I was going to say, I was in that group and no one was there, so I moved over to the 1 ED group to have a conversation.
Well, do you have is there anything that is not specific to the 1 dev staff group in terms of their very specifically talking about the targeting that progressive sector groups are dealing with right now that are affecting fundraising. Anything, since you are more fully staffed than your peers on the phone?
One thing I was sharing is that this is sort of a transitional moment for us. So we're just hired a
Okay.
second staff person, and we're in a growth phase. But I have noticed that as staff have taken more ownership of development, the board has actually been doing less of that work or feeling less
Interesting.
ownership over it. And so my issues have been more around like revitalizing and re-empowering the board to
Okay.
fundraise. Yeah, thanks.
That makes total sense. And congrats on your second dev hire. All right. Let's see what we got in the chat here. Just want to make sure we're not missing anything. Okay. All right. So I really appreciate everybody sharing their questions. And also that gives me, since we have maybe 4 groups with 1 development staff and everybody else has no staff, and we have 1 development director on the phone. So just to ground us in who we've got here. All right. So let's get into the meat of this. If your questions aren't answered today, anything that goes in the chat or that we've talked about here in our discussion real briefly, I commit to making sure we have answers for you in session 2. So just if we don't get to your burning topic today, please don't lose hope. So today, what we're really going to dig into is what I'm going to call the what. You'll notice back on the title slide, I had the what and the how. So today is really about the what, actually understanding the role of the executive director in fundraising. And we're going to attack that from 2 places. First, talking about fundraising outside of roles, but actually fundraising as it relates to your organization achieving financial resilience. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on that up front so that we have actual numbers to think about. And then the second way, and where we're going to spend the most of our time, is understanding the fundraising role you play as the ED, as the partner to your dev staff if you have them, or to yourself as the sole fundraiser. So any questions that anybody has? I'm seeing some new chat here in terms of more board goodness. All right. So we definitely need to figure out how to get boards into fundraising, I'm hearing. And we actually have several trainings on that. So I will make sure that we send those out since that has been raised. All right. Janet, anybody got their hand raised? I can see the chat, but that's it. Okay, awesome. All right, so let's talk about financial resilience for a second. So financial resilience is fundraising's end game, for those of you who are Marvel fans. So when I talk about financial resilience, we're talking about your organization's ability to weather the ups and downs of funding cycles, because any of us who take in institutional philanthropy money know that that is a very cyclical game that we have to deal with. And there are times when we are flush and there are times when we are not. So that as somebody who's got a lot of late fall money that comes in, I am watching that cash flow like nobody's business right now. Financial resilience also allows your organization to grow its power and impact without dependence on funders. So it allows you to make decisions that are more tightly aligned to your mission, as opposed to without any external influence of restricted funding. Financial resilience also allows you to catalyze your own work. So I can't imagine that there's an executive director on the phone that has not had a program that they wanted to start to be responsive to the mission that they serve and didn't have the money to do it. That is certainly the case here at Progressive Multiplier, and is one of the most common things that we get calls about. And then lastly, it's about having enough diversified revenue sources to stay strong and stable in the long run. As we have seen in spades over the last few months, we can have entire revenue streams wiped out with the stroke of a pen. Because we are inherently fragile if we are as C3 and C4 organizations. So this is what we mean when we talk about financial resilience. Any questions there? All right. Thanks for flagging for me, Janet. So I'm going to ask you to think creatively here for a second. And whoever puts this, thank you, Amy, whoever gives me an answer first in the chat gets a free hour of TA with me. So Amy, I didn't even get to ask the question yet. So yes, you are correct. This is a keystone. So second bonus question for another hour. Why is the keystone important? What does it do to all the other stones in the arch? Hold it together and stabilize. All right, anybody who said hold it together gets an hour. So Janet, if you could take note of those, that would be great. So I will email y'all and we can talk about whatever you want. All right. Financial resilience is the keystone of our work. And this is in no way saying our programs aren't important. The programs are literally why we exist. They can't exist without financial resilience. Bottom line, it's the keystone to building power. It's the keystone to taking care of internally our staff and externally the community. It is how we accomplish our missions. So leadership development, enough staff, enough time, the right programs, thriving wages, not just living wages, but thriving wages, and all the tech and process underneath to make our world as executive directors run smoothly. So before we go any further here, I want to make sure, is everybody on board with that statement, or does anybody want to chat about they feel differently about the importance of financial resilience? I have had many a program director go 10 rounds over this statement. So I want to make sure that we hear all opinions.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Fanta.
Hi, and I'm sorry I popped in late.
Nope, totally fine.
What is financial resilience?
So financial resilience for us, it's not just fundraising. Financial resilience goes beyond fundraising. It's having enough money and from different sources that you can weather a storm. That storm may be an administration that takes away your government grants. That storm might be you only have a few major donors holding up your revenue and one of them decides not to give. That storm could be the COVID-19 pandemic and you have to shut down all of your events that you raise money from. So the whole goal of financial resilience is to really marry your long-term strategy with the revenue and expenditures you can see and making sure that you are thinking long-term versus the 12 months of your budget that your board has to approve. Does that make sense?
It does, but is there a magic number?
There is. That's like the perfect setup for the next slide. I love that. This is not a fantasy land, I promise. And Taryn, I see you in the chat. I will address that in one second. So it is hard, but it is not fantasy. So there are real life numbers that equate to actually being financial resilient, where you can take a hit and continue to move. Yes, there are real life numbers, and I want to nod to the fact that, of course, there are leaders like the EDs on this Zoom, that know how to store it and both bring the money in and spend it responsibly for the mission. So what you're looking at for financial resilience is cash flow for your current fiscal and 6 months of operational expenses, that you have line of sight to that and a good probability that it is going to land. So we're not talking a funder you just met that it's going to take you 2 years to close, or something that is we're banking on growing our sustainer revenue by 50% or something that is complete fiction. This is bottom of funnel, good line of sight to cash flow for what we call fiscal plus 6. So essentially 18 months. You always want to try to carry a 6 to 8 month operational reserve. The reason for that are things like the pandemic, things where you have an, oh my gosh, big shutdown. So I can say for progressive multiplier, we went 2 years without raising any money after the initial emergency money during the pandemic. So we got down to 2 months of operational reserve in the bank. And if it hadn't been for part of the social bond money from Ford Foundation, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. And then the third leg of financial resilience is that long-term financial plan that allows you to sustainably scale to achieve your mission. So enough understanding of that fiscal plus 6 need, the reserve need, and then when you start thinking about your 5 and your 10-year arc plan, what does that actually mean in terms of the thresholds that you need to meet? If you don't know how to do this math, please sign up for coaching with us. We are happy to work with you through it. You can't accomplish financial resilience from cost cutting. You can maybe balance your 12 months budget. You can maybe stave off layoffs from cost cutting, but you can't get to a financially resilient place with anything except for revenue and long-term planning. Does that make sense to everyone, or do we have any questions there? You see any hands, Janet?
But you have a comment in the chat from Amy.
Yep. So let me go back. So Amy, let's see. I understand the pushback from program staff on the concepts of financial resilience because it can be used against them. Yep. Totally agree that the power imbalance, and we're going to talk about that as we get into the power dynamics. We can't talk about what your role is as an ED charged with fundraising if we don't talk about power dynamics. So we will talk about that for sure, Amy. And Latona, is long-term financial plan equivalent to a multi-year budget? As long as that budget is being driven by a strategic plan and not a spreadsheet exercise of we're going to grow 10% year over year or something like that. So a financial plan actually has strategy over it versus a financial projection where we can assume just, we're going to grow or contract this much. Is it Anna or Anna?
It's I just had a question about the second bullet.
Yeah, go ahead.
Reserve, is it reserve assuming the first bullet? I guess I'm just trying to think about like at what point is what you have on hand not reserve?
That's a great question. So the way we think about reserve is, so we just started our fiscal year. I can look at, so we're a $4.1 million organization with 9 full-time employee staff slots. I can look at our line of sight on, the cash that I have in what we call the bottom of the funnel. So whether that's renewals of funders or new funders that are about to cross the finish line with us, or money that we bring in through our LLC. And I can say, okay, my lights out date on the cash I know of is at least 18 months down from the start of my fiscal year. So it's sort of the known cash. It doesn't have to be cash on hand, but it has to be cash that you are, at least 80% plus sure is going to come in the door. And then on top of that, you want sitting in some sort of interest bearing or passive revenue producing mechanism 6 months of an operational reserve. That is you don't touch it unless something like the pandemic happens. This is a really big ask. We are not here yet as progressive multiplier. I've got, I want to say 3 months in reserve as of right now, and that's just because we just landed a bunch of our grants. So I used a good chunk of our reserve last year because of what the EDs with one fundraising staff, which I am one of, we lost all of our environmental justice funding, which was 3 different funders because they pulled out, given what was going on with the administration. So because of that, I dipped hard into our reserve. Does that answer your question, Anna?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just like so early on in fundraising and like running an operational budget that like this seems like a dreamland, like your
Yes.
fantasy land. So I'm just
Yeah.
like, wow, okay, that's even a thing.
Yeah, and that's why we talk about it. And is it Katie or Kati? Laterno?
It's Katie.
Katie. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, the reserve is on top of your operational cash on hand, and it should
Okay.
be invested something, that's actually earning you more. And Anna, we put this up here for a reason. Like most fundraisers or EDs are never trained in what financial resiliency actually takes. They're trained to raise this year's budget, or maybe we've got a 2-year budget. Or maybe if we're really fancy, we have a 3-year budget, but that's usually about all we see. So it is like the goal is to make this less fantasy land. And how do over time you get to a financially resilient place? This is not a flip the switch strategy. This is something to build to. So please don't let that turn you off or make you go, oh my gosh. Like if you've got line of sight on this fiscal year, good on you. You know, if you're like, our lights out date is in 6 months, we've been there. So there is absolutely no judgment here. I also want everybody to know what it would feel like to be secure, as opposed to sweating friggin' bullets every time we see payroll come out of our bank account. So, which I can tell you that I do. So please know that this is just, we want to say, here is what the actual resiliency line is. And that may take you 3, 5, 7 years to build, but that is the end game. Does that make sense? Okay. And yes, cash on hand for 6 months. As I say, we have definitely been there. So there is, as I say, no judgment. So let's put some numbers to this because I want to make sure that I tailor this, knowing that we have a lot of folks who are no dev staff EDs. I am betting I can predict what this poll is going to say, but I want to gut check. Janet, could you pop up this poll? How are we all feeling about where we sit in terms of financial resiliency? We're okay for this fiscal. We're okay for fiscal, and we can see into the beginning of next fiscal. We're awesome. We have reserves. We're not touching them. And then there's, well, um, my answer to this, I think we are solidly in B now as progressive multiplier. Okay. So seeing most people are in that good for this fiscal, maybe good for the next 6 months. And we do have a handful of folks who have reserves, which is awesome. Great. So yes, and Amy, 100% is that if you are a 1-person shop or a 2-person shop, this is not, financial resilience is something that comes with maturity. Or that you are, running very skinny in a small shop at your onset. Some EDs are completely okay because they know they can land big dollars when they need to. Other EDs like me, I don't have a lot of big relationships. Our founding ED did. I don't. So the fundraising is a struggle for us, and we really have to work for it because we don't any longer have an ED with relationships. We really lead into our board for that. So, all right, let's keep a moving. So let's get into what our roles are when it comes to being an ED who has fundraising experience. I still get queasy when you see money going out of your account. Yeah, 100%. I literally like break out into sweats every time our payroll comes out of our account, even though like I wrote the budget. I know exactly when it's going, how much it is, etc. So um, perfectly perfectly normal to sweat that. All right. So let's talk for a minute about um, what our role is in fundraising as executive directors. So I took over from a founding ED who had been the ED of both really small and really giant orgs. He was the ED of Greenpeace. Leading was in his nature. He was awesome at it. So while he took a ridiculous amount of care with my transition in terms of transitioning relationships, things like that, I never actually got a job description from him. There was just an assumption that I knew what an ED was supposed to do since I had worked for them for my entire career. But as Janet will tell you, I am a girl who really needs structure. And I am totally guilty of over engineering. So, so I went internet searching and found George Gale's letter to a new ED. Um, and of all the ED job descriptions that I read in my quest to put structure around my new professional world, this is the thing that I found that best describes our jobs. Um, Vision, people, and money in that order. That's why we started with financial resilience, because inherent in the math is your vision for your organization and how you want to invest in the people that are going to bring it to life. So we'll get into the vision first and then break down why we need it in fundraising. And yes, this is actually printed on my wall. So when I forget what I'm actually supposed to be doing, it's there. All right. So let's talk about inspiring people to reach for the stars first. This is one that I think gets neglected when we become EDs. Because all of a sudden you're doing things like learning how to read financial statements and P&L statements and figuring out compliance. And if you're a remote org like us, figuring out employment rules in a half a dozen states. So the visionary piece can go downhill quickly, and you can get mired in the functional weeds because there are a whole lot of them. But this is literally the number one job we have, is inspire people to reach for the stars. Your job is to create a vision for the organization and constantly tell that story of where it is and where it's going on the journey to get there. The reason this is important for fundraising, whether you are doing it yourself or the four of you who have staff on the phone, or is the development director who's on the phone with us will tell us, is that fundraisers literally can't do their job without the vision, because that is what they're selling, is this new sense of what's possible and these very specific cases to donors, investors, corporate sponsors on how they can be part of that new sense of what's possible. Right now, our development director and I are working on, because I fully admit that I have been really mired in operational weeds and I let this get a little dusty. So refreshing really what is our vision, and what can we actually get people behind and start inspiring people around. So there is that very distinct piece. The other part of inspiration is your thought leadership. The thought leadership pieces, whether they be you're writing a blog, you're going on a podcast, you're quoted in Chronicle of Philanthropy or SSRI or any of those, SSIR, Stanford Social Innovation. So any of those actually help your fundraisers open the door or retain, or it helps you do that because it gives you something to talk about. It's that tangible report card, so to speak, of where you are in that journey. So that it is absolutely critical that you are talking about and telling that story. So those are the two pieces around inspiring people to reach for the stars that are part of our jobs as ED/slash fundraisers or EDs with a single fundraiser that needs this from us. So we're going to do a little self-evaluation throughout the next 40 minutes we have together. So I want you to ask yourself, have you given your fundraiser, even if it's yourself, your short and long-term vision for the organization? And have you planned your thought leadership and comms for the year? Give yourself a point for each question you can answer yes to. Janet, can you throw up that poll? So you're giving yourself either no points because you haven't done either, 1 point if you've done one of these things, or 2 points if you've done both. All right, seeing lots of 1 points. So it looks like the majority folks are, oh, what does it mean to plan thought leadership? So when you think about your vision and the story you want to tell over the next 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is, how are you telling that story and to whom? So we always start with audiences. So who needs to hear your story? Your funders, potential investors, donors, externally, your staff first and foremost, your board. Um, so when you think about your audiences, what are your opportunities to communicate with them? Some of this is going to be in one-on-one conversations, but a lot of this is going to be in written communication that you're sending or video communication. Um, we have a comms person who wants me to do video vignettes. Really looking forward to that. So that's what we mean to plan thought leadership. We know that it usually takes somebody 12 touches to take action on something. Um, that's how I gauge my age in this sector because when I started, it was 6. It took 6 touches for somebody to take action on what you've told them. It is now 12 because our attention spans are so little and our content consumption is so big. So you have to keep telling that story to your audience. So, for example, with your funders specifically, is your brand and your story in front of them on at least a monthly basis through like an email or a quick call of like, hey, we did this thing, um, social media posts, anything like that. Halim, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. All right. Janet, can you take that poll down for me? All right. Let's get into the second piece. So job number 2 after inspire is grow and align your forces for battle. George Gale, obviously an organizer, turned ED, and I don't know how many of you on the phone are trained in the organizing tradition, but it is very much battling for some kind of justice. So if you're in a direct service position, that may not resonate with you as much, but you still have to grow and align your forces behind the mission and the vision that you are trying to accomplish. So I recommend that you reconcile and harmonize your people from the inside out. You are the first force you have to organize. So there are certain things you have to do to be able to then go out and organize the people you need around this. So the first is acknowledging that capitalism is a source of trauma for many, many people. Whether that is yourself, whether that is your staff, whether that is the community you serve. When we talk about extractive capitalism, um, we as fundraisers or ED fundraisers, we are in touchy territory. So the first thing we have to do is just say, it's not that it's just money, it's everything that's rolled into money. So I think that, you know, we have entire curriculums on what do we do about being like anti-capitalist fundraisers and things like that. The more I got into building this curriculum, I was like, oh, I want to do then do a follow-up class on this and this and this. So if there's anything that really resonates with you that you want to dig deeper into, please reach out to us. We'd love to know, and some of this stuff we have on hand. Secondly, learning how fundraising can avoid being extractive, transactional, or values misaligned. And I see, Amy, that you're really interested in point number 2. This is making sure that you are very grounded in that not all money is good money. So who is it coming from, or what is it coming from, is sort of the first gut check. So for example, my grantees, when we used Bank of America, pushed back and said, you're housing funds at some place that funds fossil fuel work. That's not okay. We will not take that grant because you are making Bank of America richer. We do all our banking at Amalgamated now because that was the one bank we could find that could pass that sniff test. So that's what we mean by like, so in terms of fundraising being non-extractive. So when we think of extractive fundraising, it is, and we'll get into a little bit of white supremacy culture in fundraising. Extractive fundraising is fundraising that does not honor and uplift the community it is meant to serve. So if we are engaging in over asking the served community or not asking the community in a way that honors their capacity, if we are doing any of the like classic 1970s fly in the eye kind of fundraising, where we are actually looking at what we are asking people to give to with pity, that is considered extractive. Anything that is transactional, like because you give me this, I then give you that. And whether that is, we treat our big donors better. That is not a practice we should engender, because that means that you value a $300 donor more than a $3 donor. And if you are actually aligning your forces for battle, that doesn't matter. So hopefully, Amy, that answers a little bit of your question. That in and of itself is like an entire curriculum, and we do several trainings on it. So happy to follow up with that information. That's one of my personal passions. Amy, does that answer enough for right now? Or is there any specific question you'd like me to stop on?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because going back to point number 1, right? Like where the money's coming from, like
Yep.
if we're going to be honest about where all this money's coming from, it is all extractive. Like these foundations, you know, I can say this here, I can't say in a lot of other places, but like these foundations exist because they're tax shelters for all these rich people.
Exactly. Yep. I don't know how many of you went to Maria Chijo's Fundraising Friday a couple weeks ago. She talked about exactly that philanthropy existed to, you know, launder the money. And that's a fact, and that's part of the white supremacy culture that is embedded in fundraising. All right, I know we're running a little bit behind timestamp wise here. So the other things in terms of how you need to align yourself is committing to creating a culture that embraces fundraising as a keystone, and knowing your own organization, your own staff, the people it serves, so that you can actually authentically represent them and their stories when fundraising, when they aren't present with you. So let's get into some of the deeper organizing here. So when it comes to growing and aligning your team, hiring and starting your internal team to understand that fundraising is not a cost center or dirty work. It's strategic, it's mission critical, and do that in a way that is trauma informed. So we've got a lot of groups that are organizing groups. And one of the things that we've done with a lot of our grantees is actually do fundraising training for organizers. And that has, you know, been a real culture shift of what does it mean to actually be able to look at organizing money the same way we look as organizing people in when we're talking about our missions. Um, when it comes to growing and aligning your board, there is no such thing as a non-fundraising board. It is the number one thing that we hear. Um, so the board literally, their job is to be a governing body and ensure the financial health, right? Like, so when somebody says to me, we don't have a fundraising board, I've yet to read board bylaws that don't have ensuring financial health and wellness in their purview. So part of organizing your board as an ED is confronting that head on. That does not mean that your board needs to give you big gifts. They can still be a fundraising board. We don't have a single donor on our board, but they are a deep fundraising board in that they provide counsel. They help us do that storytelling. They open doors for us to people who could potentially give us money. All of those things are the sort of like the catalytic pieces that happen before the gift. That's fundraising too. So, and we have to put it in that light, is that, you know, you don't just walk in and land a gift. There is a ton of ground softening, and your board is perfectly positioned to do that ground softening. One of the specific questions that had come up in registration was, how do you organize your board fundraising committee when it comes to interacting with your ED and your staff? So these folks, so if you set that culture with your board that, yep, fundraising is on the job description, not giving, fundraising, two different animals. The board fundraising committee has the very specific fundraising planning with the staff on their plate. So these are the folks who I serve on Friends of the Earth board. I meet with their development director, and because of my skill set, serve as a strategy sounding board. So make sure you've got fundraisers, actual professional ones on your board. These are the folks that you can give very specific, we need your help opening this door. We need your help making this ask. We need you to take this portfolio of these donors to Steward and provide specific support. So your board fundraising committee should be thought of as extra hands to do the specific tasks in the fundraising strategy. And then growing and aligning the forces that are your, I call them your B2B partners, so other nonprofits. If you're working in coalition work doesn't happen just by working together. You have to have cash behind it. So fundraising really has to be part of any coalition conversation. I have worked with dozens of coalitions that had fantastic ideas, could not get them off the ground because financial concerns were not the first topic on the table of how are we going to pay for the capacity to do this thing. It can't be a hard conversation to have. Katie, I just want to make sure I'm not missing any question or comment.
No, that was from a few minutes ago.
Okay. That's
It was
totally
the earlier
fine.
conversation about philanthropy and capitalism and all that stuff.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm, you know, I know we're only slated for like sessions 1 and 2, but if that seems to hit a nerve, so if people are interested in doing an ad hoc session with us, happy to do that around, because we can go deep on that one. So with this alignment piece, these are the 4 things that we consider that you have to do to grow and align your forces for battle. Be able to see a vision of fundraising that isn't extractive, transactional, and values misaligned. Put fundraising on equal internal reputation footing with your programs. Instill the fundraising ethos in your board and train those who step up specifically to bring in revenue. And have the fundraising conversation first with the groups you want to partner with programs on. So let's do another quick self-evaluation. We're going to compile the scores at the end to see how we're doing. So, you know, inspiring folks towards a vision. How are we doing now on aligning and growing our forces for battle? I see mostly in that 2 to 3 point range. I'm getting that vibe from this group that we're sort of in the middle, which is a good place to be. Great. Okay, Janet, you want to take that down, my friend? All right. So now's the biggie and the heavy conversation. So the last piece of our letter to a new executive director tells us that the third part of our job, remember, vision, people, money. So the third part is raising the money to pay for it. If you won't fundraise, you should not be a solo ED. In preparing for this presentation, I asked all of my development director or former development director friends what they would have wanted the EDs along the way in their career to know. Every single person that I asked, and there were probably 27 of them total, this was some version of this was on their feedback to me. So if you are scared to fundraise, if it doesn't feel comfortable, and you are a solo ED, please, please, please reach out to us. That is what the fundraising coaching is for, because it is part of your job, and our job is to make you comfy with it. So, so I hear you, Katie, that you would love to seek some of that training, and you hoped your board would do that. So that is why we're here. And if you need help training your board, that is also why we're here. So I've broken this down into what all EDs need to do, what solo ED fundraisers need to do with one staff, with multiple staff, and want to get into the power dynamics thereof. So all EDs need to reserve minimum 25% of their time for fundraising. And that is if you are in a very mature, fundraising is a well-oiled machine kind of place. I spend 50% of my time on fundraising. 50% fundraising, 30% programs, 20% admin. It is hard to protect that time. Janet can tell you on my calendar exactly what hours I protect for fundraising. You really have to do it, or you will never get to a point of financial resilience. When I put that number out there, how many of you are like, that's insane? Or Latona, that feels nuts. Yeah. This is another things we don't tell EDs when they are hired or elevated to an ED, especially if they have grown up in the programmatic side of life. So it is really important to get very real about if you can protect this time as an ED. Doesn't matter if you have staff or not, there is certain fundraising that only you can do. This is a sample breakdown. This is not my breakdown, but because we don't do major gifts or events yet, I spend most of my time on donor stewardship, donor acquisition, and thought leadership. So that's where my world is, and fundraising strategy. And it is fully 50% of my time as a $4.1 million organization. And we are 7 years old for reference. The other thing all EDs that are part of the raise the money to pay for it job description is getting deeply conversant in fundraising, if it's not your background, because you can't support your staff or do the work yourself if you don't get fundraising. So any ED that gets hired, if whoever hired you, the board, or in some cases we see other C-suite hiring EDs, this is missed piece a lot. So if you are an ED who's like, I am nowhere near conversant in fundraising, you are not alone. And we can definitely point you in the right direction for resources. But as you grow in your career as an ED or your staff gets bigger, it's really important that you can speak fundraising to the people who fundraise for you, or else they lose faith in you. The other thing is to embrace rejection. You are going to get 3 no's for every yes. That's sort of the, broad industry standard, is that we only close about 25% of the money we ask for. So, and that, when I looked at the last 7 years of progressive multiplier, we were like 2 percentage points off. So this is actually fairly accurate for being a benchmark. So those are the things that everybody on this call needs to deal with in terms of the raise the money to pay for it responsibilities. Yes. Fundraising is not the same as revenue diversification, Anna. You're totally right. So we can have a super successful philanthropically funded nonprofit or a government grant funded nonprofit, and they do not have the revenue diversification required to be financially resilient. In an ideal world, you do not want institutional philanthropy making up more than 50% of your revenue. I will fully sit here and say I believe wholeheartedly in that statistic, and my own balance sheet has 93% institutional money on it. So this is not like stones and glass houses or anything like that. It is really hard to diversify your money, and it takes time. So we launched our diversification efforts in 2023. I have gotten to an 80-20 split. That's as far as I've gotten in launching an LLC. So this is the year that we are trying to make really deep pivots in our own diversification. But that just means like your portfolio of revenue is not coming from a single type of revenue. So if it's not philanthropy, you can diversify into individual donors. So whether that be small grassroots donors, monthly donors, major donors, planned giving, lots of flavors in the individual donor realm. Corporate donors or sponsors. So one of our diversification pieces, we are hosting our first convening, and we've landed a few corporate sponsors for that. Of course, that brings its own, they have to be incredibly values aligned for us to take corporate money. Other popular diversification tactics we see, fee for service, where you are monetizing something that you already do. So we have groups that do trainings, like we've worked with TransCan Work and some groups like that, where they give away trainings on how to make like the workplace safe for trans individuals. So starting to charge for those services, and you can do it on a sliding scale and still make it accessible. The other thing that we're seeing right now, because of the shift in the landscape and the anticipated weaponization of the IRS, are people standing up LLCs. So we have an LLC called Multiplier Effect that is an actual, honest to goodness, for profit. And it can give money into our C3 or C4. So the multi-entity piece is also at play in there. Laura, does that answer your question? Awesome. Okay. Let's keep trucking through raising the money to pay for it. So I am going to EDs with who owns the LLC. In our case, it is a regarded entity, and our C4 is the only member. There are lots of different machinations for how to set up an LLC, and it's very dependent on state law. We've supported several groups across the country in doing the same thing, and it is a different path for each of them. We do have a resource of like what questions to ask legal counsel if you're interested in that kind of tactic. But for us, we did that because C4 money, really hard to raise from philanthropy. So that's why we wanted our LLC to be able to put its donations into the C4. Again, a whole other class we could spin off. Okay, so since the majority of the folks on this call are EDs with no development staff, I will go here first, and then I'm going to circle back based on time. So to raise the money to pay for it, the very first thing EDs with no staff need to do is to plan retention first. So if you have taken over for an existing ED, That is where the majority of your time needs to go. Make sure the relationships with the people who already give to you get to be rock solid. It takes about 3 times the effort in terms of time to bring in new support than to take care of what you've got first. So this is incredibly cost-effective use of your time to plan getting into retention first. The next easiest step is your own existing relationships. So these are not necessarily folks who have given to the organization that you are currently working at, but these are people who believe in you. This may cause a retention issue for the person behind you, but you've got your entire tenure to make that person fall in love with the organization, not just be a fan of yours. I saw this deeply when Phil left Greenpeace and came to Progressive Multiplier. He brought with him a whole handful of environmental philanthropy connections, as you can imagine. And even though they had never invested in funding intermediaries who helped groups fundraise, they funded in him because they believed in what he was doing. So we hustled really hard to retain them, and we did until we had our anchor EJ funder pull out when the government started shifting after January. Um, so really important to go out to folks who you have gotten donations from before, or personal supporters who support the work that you do personally. Third thing that folks with no development staff need to do: board or advisory council members need actual volunteer fundraising roles and training. You may not be able to train them. That's where you need to tap into folks like Progressive Multiplier. There are other folks out there that do this kind of training as well. We will often do it pro bono, or we've got something where we are getting compensated and Resilience Initiative is paying us. So don't feel the pressure of, oh my gosh, I have to train these folks and I don't know how to do this. So lean in to the folks who are here. But in this case, actually tap somebody on the board to be your fundraising strategist with you. You can't do this alone. So you have to actually come up with really succinct job descriptions. If you need help, and that's a tool that we can certainly share, is that we've got draft job descriptions for, if you need somebody who is your fundraising go-to. Right now, especially given what's going on in the world, there is a lot of free technical assistance available. Resilience Initiative is one of the best, and they have their entire resource hub that's available to you. So don't hesitate to reach out to folks who have those free or low-cost services to help you with fundraising. If you look on Progressive Multiplier.fund or .fund, we have a weird URL. It just is. Somebody else owns progressivemultiplier.com. We have an entire section called the Convergence, where we've posted every tool, every training, all the things for free when it comes to fundraising. So there is a lot there, and there are other folks who are or have done similar, and that's free to use. So make sure you're aware of what resources are out there. One of the most valuable resources is a network called Catch a Fire. These are professionals who are volunteering their time. And they're volunteering their professional skill set. So this goes beyond fundraising. If you are an ED, like shop of 1 or 2 people, Catch a Fire is a really good resource to find help with budgeting, accounting, website management, picking your CRM, fundraising, any of those things. So there are folks out there who are very, very willing to help. Okay. So we have 10 minutes left. So I want to make sure, is there anyone who wants to go through racial dynamics between development staff and EDs? I know yes, Laura, absolutely, you'll be getting the slides. That is a question. Fanta, okay. So with this was a specific question of an ED of color with white development staff and how to deal with those racial dynamics. So racial dynamics, regardless of whether the ED is white or of color and the staff is whatever racial mix we've got in the roles here, there are dynamics we have to name and claim, just is. Um, so we can't really get around this. There is a ton of sort of cultural history around extractive capitalism, especially when it comes to Black and Brown communities. So we just need to be okay with talking about this. And I want to call out and recognize and encourage our EDs of color. This shit is heavy. It's an energy drain, and you have to lean into the supports that you trust. There is like being an ED is hard enough. Being an ED of color is harder. Being an ED of color who is dealing with racial dynamics internally is harder than that. So, and yes, we can totally talk about ED and funder as well. So I just want to name that it's an energy drain. And Resilience Initiative does a fantastic job of some of the wellness supports. There are also other groups out there. So if anybody like is feeling that burn and that they are dealing specifically with this, please let us know. We're happy to connect you with whatever resources that we can. We cannot get away with the fact that white supremacy culture is deeply embedded in this country's fundraising and philanthropy. So when we think about things like donor-centric fundraising or donor delight or white saviorism or poverty tourism or any of those things that are centering the white community in fundraising, that is what we mean when we say white supremacy culture is deeply embedded in our space. So in the case where we often see where we have an ED of color and white development staff, actually saying as an ED of color, calling that out, that you are mindful of the racial dynamics in donor relations, that you are very aware and you want to be a partner in tackling them intentionally, because they are going to show up. Because even if you and your development director are in lockstep, you are often going to run into donors, major donors, or funders who are going to defer to your white staff. And I've seen it happen. Both of my managing directors are Black women. And it is rare that we are on a call where I don't automatically get treated, even before we talk about who we are and our roles, as the person in charge. It is a heartbreaking reality that we are dealing with. So make sure that you are open with your development director about, we need to talk about the racial dynamics. And it will happen, whether it's situational or by their choice, that their privilege is overshadowing your positional leadership. You have to ask them to step back and to be conscious of those moments. So I see this, and same thing happens when we've got board members in play, Anna, that 100%. And so we have to be willing to have like a step back conversation and be honest about it. We have some scripts that we've written for these kind of conversations, if that's helpful. Just as a teaser, at the end of session 2, we will have you will get essentially a virtual care package from us with scripts and things like that. So the other thing is that asking your staff to use their positional privilege to expand space versus compete. It is not you need to be above one another. It is they have and will have, because they are white, a positional privilege because of their race. And we have to train our development directors to use that in a way that expands space for our leaders of color. That is the best way to have professional allyship in play. So those are the 3 pieces. And I went back and forth with my leadership team on these, and this is where we landed. So this is definitely something that I think we would like to dig into more deeply with an upcoming training. the other thing that is, I think, true, whether it is a racial dynamic or not, is that the clear roles are critical, like full stop. And when racial dynamics exist in the ED and fundraiser, or ED and board member, or ED and funder relationship, actually the ED's job is just what we've talked about: vision, people, raise the money. The fundraising strategy comes from those things. So the development director is there to advise you, to inform you, to execute on that vision, but they are not the person who sets the vision. That's your job. And making sure that, like, the number of people who don't have a job description, like I said, that's how I came across this letter. I didn't have a job description. It's not a joke. You actually have to say, this is your job, this is my job. So you can see where your puzzle pieces fit. I want to name that this is a very deep subject that we could spend a ton more time on, and I would really like to. So we'll figure out, Janet, how to do that as a, one-on-one sessions or things like that. Yes, the next section is an hour and a half. Okay, so before we wrap up, one more piece of this self-evaluation. Again, give yourself a point for each of the things that you do. So understanding that fundraising is your job because of your title alone. Spending at least 25% of your time in fundraising, which includes getting conversant in it. Establishing your role with clarity with your development director, like we just talked about. And setting fundraising goals in alignment with your vision and reality. And I say this for those EDs who have development directors, and they often give the development director a completely crazy goal that isn't grounded in mathematical or landscape reality. So give yourself a point for each of those. All right, we are sitting in the middle again. I like it. This crew is on its way, which is awesome. All right. So Janet, I'm going to give you a minute to do really quick math. So I asked Janet, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do we know what our role is? And are we understanding what we should be doing?
4.75.
4.75. We are indeed a middle of the road crew, which is great. So our next session will be on the how. This was the what, and these 10 points are the what. So obviously we've got some room to grow, but we are also doing a lot right, which is awesome. So at our next call, we will spend 90 minutes on the how. So we're going to take these 10 points and go, how do you actually do it? And what are the tools we actually have to do those things? If there are any other things that you want to make sure we cover, whether they are questions from the chat or anything that came up for you, please email us. I'm Bethany at progressivemultiplier.fund, and Janet is Janet at progressivemultiplier.fund. Let us know, because we will tailor the curriculum next week for the questions that come up. We do have a little survey monkey that we would ask that you fill out. Let us know how this was for you. If it was not your jam, please tell us so that we can alter for next week, and really appreciate you. Are there any questions as we wrap up? Janet, can you throw that link in the chat? Any questions or comments or anything at all before we wrap up? All right. I see a call for the IRG Summit resources. We will absolutely send those your way. All right. And Laura, please reach out. I would love to finish our chat. Thank you all so much for honesty, great conversation, and vulnerability, and leaning into this space. And we look forward to next week where we can continue the conversation. Thanks all.